Hi, I'm Doug, and this is Lisa, our kitchen teacher extraordinaire. And today, in a bit of a departure, Lisa's decided to teach us 3 meringues.
No, you misread my text. I'm going to teach 3 ways to make meringue.
Oh, yeah, that's a bit more on brand.
So what is meringue anyway? In its simplest form, meringue is just egg whites and sugar. That's all. Egg whites are mostly protein and water. When we whisk them, we rearrange the protein structure to trap air. When we add sugar, it becomes more stable and tastes a lot better. So today I'm going to make 3 different kinds of meringue for you: French, Italian, and Swiss meringue. We're going to turn them into cookies and we'll compare them when they're done. Let's bring this camera a lot closer so you can see what's going on in the bowl. We'll begin with French meringue, the simplest kind. It's often used for topping pies and folding into mousses and batters to make them lighter. The first step for all meringues is to separate the egg whites from the egg yolks. It's very important that you not get any egg yolk into the whites, or they won't whip up.
What about eggshell into the yolks?
That's no good either. We'll be using 3 egg whites in each of our recipes today. It's easiest to separate cold eggs, but it's important that your egg whites be at room temperature so they'll whip to their maximum volume. The ratio for egg whites in French meringue is anywhere from 1 to 1 up to double the sugar. The more sugar you use, the more stable the meringue will be. So for baked applications like these cookies, we can use less sugar, and for applications like on top of a pie, we'll need to use more sugar. Make sure the bowl and whisk that you're using is absolutely clean with no traces of fat inside. You can add the egg whites to the bowl and begin whisking them at a medium-low speed. If you're going to add flavoring or food dye, this is the time to do it. When the egg whites become frothy like this, you know that the protein strands are separating from their usual bonds and are ready to trap air. Egg whites are naturally acidic, but as they age, they become more alkaline. So we add a little bit of acid through either cream of tartar or lemon juice to enhance the protein bonds. If you have very fresh eggs from your backyard chickens, you won't need to do this step, but you will need to feed the chickens. So this is just froth. We're at the no peaks yet stage. Since this is YouTube, it may look like I'm checking this every 10 seconds, but really there's a minute or 2 between each time. Now we're reaching the beginning of the soft peak stage. Notice how the peaks droop over to the side. At the soft peak stage, we're ready to turn up the speed a little and add the sugar. With French meringue, we add the sugar directly to the egg whites. We want to make sure that we add it very slowly, just about a tablespoon at a time, so it has time to dissolve. We don't want any gritty sugar left in our egg whites. At this point, the meringue is still shiny. We have medium peaks that tilt over to the side. So we keep mixing and adding sugar. Now that all the sugar is added, we'll turn up the speed to medium-high and keep whipping to stiff peaks. I'm starting to see distinct lines left behind by the whisk, so I know we're getting close. This is really close. I see a little curl, so I'm going to keep going. Now you can see when I lift the whisk, the peak stands straight up. This is stiff peaks. And you can really see it when you turn the whisk upside down. I'm going to load the meringue into a piping bag with a round tip and pipe kisses onto parchment paper. And here's a pro tip: dab a little meringue under the corners of the paper to keep it from sliding around on the cookie sheet. I wouldn't recommend filling your piping bag as full as I did, since all that squeezing pushes the air out and the last few will have curled tops. All right, these are ready to go into a low heat oven for several hours to dry. And now we're on to the Italian meringue. Italian meringue is more stable and makes a beautifully silky buttercream. And ironically, it's used to make those delicate French macarons. Once again, this recipe calls for 3 egg whites. I've seen a lot of recipes online that call for 8 or 9, and I've never been successful of whipping that many egg whites in my home mixer. It's just too much. So if you see one of those that you like, just scale the recipe down to under 5 egg whites and you'll be just fine. The major difference here is how we treat the sugar. For Italian meringue, we're going to use quite a bit more sugar and dissolve it in a syrup before adding it to the egg whites. This part starts off identically to the French. We're going to whip these egg whites into a foam before we add the sugar. To make the sugar syrup, we're going to combine water and sugar on the stove over medium-high heat and boil it until it reaches about 233 degrees. It should be completely clear with large bubbles throughout. If you have any sugar crystals gathering on the side of the pan, use a brush wet with water to wipe it down. You see how it's bubbling around the edges of the pan, but there's still that white section in the middle? It's not done until the bubbles are all across the pan and the whole thing is clear. There are large clear bubbles throughout, so this is ready. It's important to get this sugar syrup right in the bowl while it's still hot. Let's quickly get our egg whites moving again and drizzle the syrup in slowly. Notice how slowly I'm pouring it in, just a drizzle at a time. Also notice that the sugar is still boiling. It's important to not let it solidify before pouring it in. I'm whipping this at medium speed for several minutes until it cools to room temperature. At our first check, we can see this is soft peaks with a little curl on top. Glass bowls retain a lot of heat, so it may need some assistance in cooling down. I use a flexible ice pack for this.
This technique is also good if your mixing bowl has sustained some sort of sports-related injury.
This is really close, but it's still too warm, so I'm going to turn down the speed to medium to avoid overworking it. This Italian meringue is beautifully shiny with stiff peaks. It's time to put it in a bag with a French star tip for piping. I really love the texture that this tip provides. Once again, these go into a low oven to dry for a long time. The third type of meringue is my favorite. It's Swiss meringue, and it's made entirely differently. Swiss meringue is more dense than the French and Italian, but its satiny texture is divine and good for cookies, pavlova, and pie topping. Swiss meringue begins by combining egg whites and sugar in a bowl over simmering water until the sugar dissolves. Most recipes recommend using your mixer bowl over the heat, but I find that mine stays hot too long, so I use a different bowl on the heat and transfer to the mixing bowl afterward. It's important to keep the egg whites moving so that they don't cook in the bowl. You are now a non-stop whisking machine until this sugar dissolves. You can test for doneness by pulling a little up with a whisk and rubbing it between your fingers to test for grit. If it's gritty, it's not ready.
I believe you mean if there's grit, you're not done with it.
Keep testing it until all the sugar is dissolved. Once it's smooth, it's time to move. Back to the mixer.
Now you got it. Perfect.
Transfer the hot eggs to your mixing bowl and begin whisking at medium speed until it's cool and stiff peaks form. Like before, the peaks are forming faster than the bowl is cooling, so I'm going to use the ice pack. Those look like stiff peaks to me, and I'm just gonna taste a little bit to make sure it's the right temperature. Delicious. Let's load this into the piping bag. This time I'm using a Sultan tip. This is one of my favorite tips. It creates a unique ring shape with texture on the outside. At Christmas time, I make a brown sugar and cinnamon version of this cookie and hang them on a tree. Like the others, these go in the oven slow and low. After an hour and a half, you should check to see if your meringues are done. Touch the outside. If they're sticky, they need more time. If they aren't sticky but they stick to the paper, give them some more time. Once they're no longer sticky and they remove from the paper easily, turn off the oven and leave them there to cool slowly. If they cool too quickly, they will crack. When they come out of the oven, they should all be deliciously light and crispy. The Italian will have the shiniest outside and a similar texture to the French, while the Swiss will have a much smoother interior. Armed with this new knowledge, give a new type of meringue a try. And if you want more from our kitchen, click subscribe.